it gives me great pleasure to take you through this NACE Challenge Development Programme webinar this afternoon and show you how it can support and drive whole school improvement. So I'm Chris Shepherd and I'm NACE's Challenge and Curriculum Development Director, and I'll be leading this session this afternoon. We are very, very lucky in that we have a number of colleagues who have used the Challenge Development Programme with us this afternoon who will tell you, and for me that's the most valuable part of this, because they will tell you about the impact that that has had on their whole school and on whole school improvement. So without further ado, we'll get started. So I'm just going to move your lovely pictures out of the way so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to share with you first of all, I'm going to start my timer because anybody that knows me knows that I'm not great with timekeeping and I need to stick to it so that we can hear from those schools. I'm just going to go through with you first of all what the session aims are this afternoon. We will be looking at what the NACE Challenge Development Programme is, what's it all about, and how can it be used to support that transformational whole school improvement across a range of contexts. Doesn't matter what sort of school you're in, where it is, whether it's a nursery school, whether it's an independent school, whether it's a comp, anywhere, this programme can make a massive difference. We will be giving a short exemplification of the 6 elements of the Challenge Award, because you need to sort of get to grips with that yourself following this. And then, as I said, hearing about the impact of this programme from school leaders and practitioners, and giving you a brief mention of what the NACE Challenge Award accreditation is that can lead on from this involvement in the NACE Challenge programme. So a quick word about NACE for those of you who don't know as well. NACE is an independent charity and it works right across the education sector at every phase, and it's there to support practitioners to improve outcomes for all learners through the effective provision of challenge, with a focus initially on more able learners. And you can find out more about our work through the NACE website. You can see the link to that on the slide. Okay, so NACE core principles. The work of NACE is actually underpinned by the core principles that you can see on the slide, and there are 8 of them. And I just want to draw your attention to a number of these, particularly the ones with which this session aligns. So firstly, the education of more able learners is a whole school endeavour, which should be embraced by school leaders at all levels. We absolutely believe that at NACE, and we know that when you do that, it impacts positively on all learners across the school. And that then is exemplified by the next core principle, which is that addressing the needs of more able learners can raise achievement for a much wider group of learners in the school, because what it does is it makes sure that challenge is increased for everybody. And then another one, teachers are central to providing challenging and enriching education, and their professional development is paramount. The NACE Challenge Development Programme is there as a school improvement tool to impact on every single member of staff in the school and therefore every child. It's not about one person having responsibility for it and having to do everything. It must be a whole school responsibility, and at the heart, it's about what teachers do in the classroom. And that's very, very important. And what the Challenge Development Programme does is help guide you and your staff in knowing what to do and what that challenge for all should look like. And then last but not least, ability is a fluid concept. We know it can be developed through challenge. Children absolutely get cleverer when you challenge them. Whether you thought they were more able in the first place or not, they become cleverer the more cognitive challenge they experience. So again, that's one of the principles at the heart of NACE's work. Apologies if I cough during this session. I'm just getting over the after effects of COVID. So I will mute, try not to deafen you all. So a little bit about me first of all, and the reason I do this is just to let you know that I am not somebody who's been removed from teaching for years, but it's important that you know that I'm talking from experience about the impact of this award. So I have been teaching since 1985. I am currently the director of Challenge and Curriculum Development for NACE, as well as the Director of Primary School Improvement for the Nova Education Trust, which is down Nottingham Way. up until the summer when I retired, which I like to put in inverted commas, I was the executive head of Copthorne and Hollybrook, and I absolutely attest to the fact that their success, both of them are now outstanding schools, and Hollybrook went straight from special measures to outstanding. Their success is definitely down to a focus on challenge for all learners through that initial focus on the more able. And that has completely turned that school around. And it's not the only thing, but it is part and parcel. And that focus on challenge has made everybody have much higher aspirations, much stronger beliefs of the children. And it's definitely changed the entire school culture. For those of you from Wales, I've got experience of working with schools in Wales as well. And as I said, my experience of using the challenge framework as part of a leadership approach has proved transformational, certainly in what I've experienced in schools, not just the two I've led most recently, but the ones I've been involved with in Halifax and further. Okay, so there's a poll, first of all, something for you to do. So there's some questions. So my school is new to NACE, not yet a member, is a NACE member but not using the Challenge Development Programme, and so on. If you read those and just click on the ones that most refer to you, we can get an idea of who's here. Thank you, everyone. Well, that gives us an idea, doesn't it? So we've got 50% of you here that aren't already NACE members, so that's interesting. Some that are already NACE members but not using the Challenge Award and so on. And some who got the Challenge Development Programme but are at the start of that journey. Okay, and we've got 2 NACE Challenge Award accredited schools, which is wonderful. And there's somebody else in there, and somebody else in the waiting room. So that's really interesting for us and really useful for us to know. So thank you very much for completing that. Hopefully this will address the perspectives that all of you are coming from through this webinar. Okay, so then on to this. She says it's not clicking forward. Right, what is it? What is the NACE Challenge Development Programme? So I'm going to give you a second or two. Right, so what the Challenge Development Programme is a package of support and tool and resources that helps you review your current provision and evaluate it in terms of how you identify more able learners. What does challenge look like across the school? Is there challenge inherent in everything you do? So there's a set of tools there to support you with that. And at the heart of this whole programme is what we call the Challenge Framework. And this is a self-evaluation, action planning and school improvement chart that will help to drive your school improvement through. So it helps you to evaluate yourself against certain standards that we'll talk about in a while, but it will also help you to identify what it is you need to be doing, because for each standard there is exemplification showing you what you can do, what you need to do to make sure that you've fulfilled that element of the challenge framework. And when you've fulfilled all 6 elements, and as I said, more about those soon, you can then, if you feel that you're confident in those areas, you can then go and be assessed for the NACE Challenge Award, but we'll talk more about that in a minute. Okay, it is designed to support schools that are already demonstrating good or outstanding challenge and more able provision, as well as those who've got that as a key action area for development. So you can use it if you've not got any provision in place or any specific provision in place for your more able, or you think that challenge really does need lots and lots of work, or you can use it if you're further on in your journey, because it will give you specific support and advice to make that provision better. The framework itself is regularly reviewed to align with the expectations of Ofsted and make sure that it fits and make sure it supports schools with that. And as I said, having gone through Ofsted twice last academic year, the challenge framework definitely aligns with it and definitely supports you through that process as well. So that gives you a little bit of an overview. So again, as I said, if you have a look at this one, it's designed to support you, not just as leaders, but also practitioners, if you are uncompromising in your ambition for more able learners, to make sure that they're identified and that their needs are effectively addressed and their potential realised. And that is through that distinct focus on teaching to the top. So there's lots of support and advice about what your curriculum might look like, how you might design your curriculum and so on in order to achieve that. What does teaching to the top mean and how do we get there? And part of that is that context of challenge for all. So we know that the framework is absolutely comprehensive and robust in its criteria. And the programme can be used by both schools and clusters across all phases, as I said, that are already demonstrating good practice or at the start. But what it does is it helps you to identify what you need to do. And it makes you think about things that you might not have thought about. So, for example, schools might not have considered how they need to develop their curriculum so that it allows challenge to happen. They might not have thought about what their pedagogy needs to look like so that the needs of the more able are met and there is challenge for all. And what the framework does is give you some great exemplification with lots and lots of supporting resources to help you answer those questions and help you exemplify and evaluate your own practice. Okay, so as I said, the components of the NACE Challenge Programme are the main part, which is the challenge framework. There is also a handbook. Schools get a handbook, and with that they get a challenge, a getting started call, which is delivered by a NACE associate, telling you really where you need to start from. And I know some of you put questions in, sent questions in around, well, we've already got the challenge framework, but I don't really know where to start from. Definitely, you get a getting started call, and if you're halfway through, you've already got Challenge Award accreditation and you're going for re-accreditation, you also get a free challenge check-in. So that is there to help you get started so that you get absolutely bespoke guidance, one-to-one, about where you should go. Now, through that first stage of the Challenge Development Programme, you also have access to the Challenge Hub. And then dependent on the package that you purchase, you might also have purchased half-a-day consultancy, and then the next layer up is you get half a day's consultancy, which is an associate, again, in school, but you also get a full day's bespoke CPD for your school on challenge and the more able. I always think, from a head's point of view, that is the best package to get, because you get that really focused half-day support, somebody coming into your school and saying, right, you've got this framework, where do you start? We can help you, talk you through what you need to do and help you with your action planning. Now, through that hub, you're going to get access to lots and lots of different resources that will help you on your challenge journey and will help you make sure that you're meeting the needs of the more able and making sure that you're achieving challenge for all. Okay, so, and then this, as I said, the CPD is then, if you get the bespoke CPD, that is designed around your needs within your school. So you might say, well, we're fine with identification, Chris. We know what we're doing with our more able. We don't need to work that, but we really do need to look at challenge in the classroom for everybody to understand it. So that's what we want our day focused on, or it can be a mixture of things. Okay, so moving on now. There are optional extras with the challenge development package as well. So PE schools can broker an additional half-day consultancy, and there are also coaching support sessions for leaders that are available. Now, you'll have heard me talk about this already this evening, but we know that you also get provided with the opportunity for accreditation through the NACE Challenge Award. And that is a really prestigious award that shows everybody out there how well you are catering for the needs of the more able and also providing challenge for all your learners right across the curriculum. So that's also provided through your challenge framework, because that's giving you the framework for assessment for that award as well. You also get, if you are a Challenge Award school, that designated support. So once you become a Challenge Award school, there's a free Challenge Award school network every term that you can access. But you also get access to a community of like-minded schools and professionals through that NACE Research and Development Hub. And if you're not a member of NACE already, and somebody's asked this question, that's why I'm answering it right now. One of the things that you get as a NACE member is being able to join a NACE Research and Development Hub, but also having that access to NACE like-minded schools, all the blogs, all the information that other schools share and post on our website that you can use to improve your practice. Okay, so before we go on and dig a little bit deeper, I'm keeping a check on the time, into the actual challenge development programme itself, I think it's really important to consider why, if we want to have highly effective schools, we should focus our work on this area and on more able and challenge provision. So again, I'll give you a moment or two to read this slide. Okay. If you haven't read it, it's worth having a look at Professor Carrie Winstanley's Equality of Challenge principle. And in there, she talks about the fact that learners have an entitlement to have their needs met. It is our moral responsibility to make sure that more able learners have their needs met, just like it's our moral responsibility to make sure that our children who have learning difficulties have their needs met. We wouldn't ever think of saying, oh no, don't worry about the SEN children, they'll be fine. No, and equally, more able learners have very specific needs that we need to think about, and they have a right to have their learning needs met. Okay, so that's part of it. That's very, very important about why we should think about more able and challenge provision. We also know that if we focus on challenge for all through the lens of our teaching to the top, we will make that we will much better prepare our children to be leaders of the future and to actually be able to face life in the future. And the same principles apply to the curriculum of the future. That is based on the principles of education for the more able. We know, as I've mentioned already, that if we really focus on the more able and challenge, we will raise overall standards, and particularly through that focus on challenge for all. If you look at Copthorne and Hollybrook that I mentioned at the beginning, and I'm sure Nicola and Michaela, who is here as well, will talk to you about the impact on outcomes in terms of scores on the doors and greater depth outcomes, for example, at primary level, is phenomenal, because you have suddenly raised the bar for everybody. And as we know as well, that will raise learners' aspirations. They start to believe in themselves, and once they start to believe in themselves, they do better. And likewise, it improves school culture. Children stop worrying about making a mistake. They start realizing that things being hard is a learning opportunity. And then you just change the way that schools feel, and they become places where really deep learning is happening. Okay, so another reason is obviously Ofsted. Don't really like to mention them too much. But again, if you just look at, I'll give you a minute or two to look at these quotes. One is from Sean Hartford, and the other one is from a January 2020 inspection report. So just have a look at those for a minute. Okay, so you can see from there that the more able agenda and more able practice provision really matters. And it matters because if you're not thinking about your more able, it's very unlikely that all your children are going to be challenged effectively, or even any of your children. Now we know that Ofsted have raised the bar in their scrutiny of the substance of education and how well all pupils experience a challenging, knowledge-rich curriculum. They're looking for a deep and rich curriculum offer that does more than just ensure pupil engagement, but that actually creates opportunities for a deeper and richer content that will stretch, challenge, and provide a range of different contexts within which pupils work outside of what their normal experience might be. So we need to make sure that the entire curriculum is sufficiently ambitious for the most able, whilst also creating those opportunities for the nurture of talent and ability. And the teachers need to have the skills and knowledge and pedagogical knowledge to be able to teach well. And what you've got in the challenge framework is support to help that happen. Okay, and we also know that in terms of Ofsted, the outstanding descriptors in personal development emphasise that requirement for an enriched curriculum, and they talk about opportunities for pupils to develop their talents and interests being of exceptional quality. And that also goes hand in hand. Those enrichment activities aren't the be all and end all, and they're certainly not the first port of call when it comes to thinking about the Challenge Development Framework and the Challenge Development Programme, but they are part of it. You know, part of that, you know, how are we enriching the curriculum? And again, what the framework does is support you in ensuring that that's happening. So again, keep an eye on the time, that'll be fine. A little bit from Estyn now, which is the this is the inspection system in Wales. So I'll give you a moment to read that as well, because again, it's another, the focus on challenge and the more able also permeates their framework. So I'll give you a moment to have a look at that. Okay, so again, you can see that that thread of challenge and providing that at a suitably advanced level was really important. And that was their report, obviously pre the whole COVID thing, but they really picked up on the importance of making sure that all children were challenged. And as I said, having experienced 2 Ofsted inspections last year, one of the threads that came through was, to what degree are SEN children being challenged? Are they experiencing cognitive challenge appropriately? And again, because of our focus on challenge in both those schools, we were, through the use of the challenge framework, we were able to talk about that in great detail and also exemplify it through the children's work. The children were able to talk about it confidently as well. Okay, so now the challenge framework itself is based on 6 elements. And you can see a little snip there. There's a Welsh version of the challenge framework as well as an English version. The version for Wales is based around the new curriculum for Wales, so it really helps support schools in developing their curriculum there. But in general, the challenge framework is based on 6 key elements. And as I've said, it sets out the criteria for that high quality provision for the more able, but in the context of challenge for all. And if you follow the framework and embed the things it helps you to embed, you will have challenge for all your learners. Okay, and but this framework can be applied to, as I said at the beginning, any context, any school across England and internationally. It's equally used by independent schools as well, so it fits each criteria. And actually, if you are from an independent school, and you're, I know some of you are this evening, one of the things that keeps coming out in ISI inspections is that schools, independent schools, are not challenging their more able, in fact, all of their children, sufficiently. Okay, so delving a little bit deeper into the NACE Challenge Framework then. As I said, what it does is provide you with a systematic school evaluation and improvement process based on evidence around the learning needs of the more able and appropriate provision for them. And it does have a proven record of effectiveness. As I've said, it's fully supportive of current Ofsted and Estyn schedules and ISI approaches, and therefore it supports overall school effectiveness. It does pick on 6 key elements. One is about leadership and governance. So what that's really looking at, and I'm not going to, I have got some slides on each of those which you'll see if you do pick up the recording of this webinar, but I'm not going to talk through them because I want you to hear from the schools. But leadership and governance, for example, is going to talk to you about how you make sure that your governors are aware of the importance of challenge for all. How are they, do they understand why a focus on the more able is important? Are outcomes for the more able, and particularly the disadvantaged more able, reported to them? Do they understand that they have ownership of that? Are they able to support and challenge the school around that provision? But moreover, the leadership in terms of every single member of staff. Do they know that provision for the more able and for challenge for all learners is everyone's responsibility and not just one person's? And how do you make that happen? So again, that might be about the policies that you create. It might be about the systems and processes that you put into action. And what that element does, again, is exemplify that for you and helps you to think about, oh, well, we do this really well. Oh, not so sure about that strand on governance, not sure we're doing that. So it'll give you advice so that you know what to do and how you can plan. Same with identification. Often identification of the more able is very, very poor in schools because it's based only on an outcomes-based identification. In other words, these children are already achieving very well and they're getting really good results, therefore they must be the more able. Well, that's fine as one element of identification, but what that does is it misses rafts of children who may be underachieving, or because they're not being challenged sufficiently, you're not identifying them as more able in the first place. So again, it gives you advice. It gives you advice and support in making sure that your transition arrangements between key stages, between schools, into the world of work and further education is also high quality in terms of supporting those more able learners. Then you've got section 3, this is the biggest section, biggest element of the challenge framework. And this is all around curriculum, teaching and support. So you'll find real guidance and exemplification in that section on what high quality teaching for challenge and ensuring that the needs of more able are met should look like and how you can achieve that. What sort of CPD should there be in place? And that also links with element 4. But also in element 3, what should your curriculum look like? You know, what questions should you be asking yourselves about your curriculum to make sure it does meet the needs of the more able, help you to identify them, and also provide challenge for all? Because there's some really deep thinking that has to go on there. And then how will that curriculum be delivered? Then third part of that one, what does support for more able learners look like? Lots of more able learners suffer from perfectionism, the negative aspects of perfectionism. So have schools addressed that? Do they know about it? Are they looking out for it? What are they doing about learners who are potentially more able but are not performing well or may have particular barriers to learning? So again, it will help you identify some of the things you could be putting into place to support your more able learners effectively. Okay, section 4 is about professional development. So again, that guidance and support in helping you to identify what sort of professional development might be in place and what you should be thinking about if you're going to have a real culture of challenge for all and effectively meet the needs of your more able learners. Number 5 is about communication and partnership, which again is something that sometimes schools don't think about. Are you working well with those learners? What does more able pupil voice in school look like? Is it collected? Are children across the school being expected to tell you the extent to which they experience challenge? Sometimes, and one of the most wonderful things, wasn't great at the time, but it's one of the most wonderful things that happened to us, was that we, right at the beginning of our journey at Hollybrook, we asked the children, what does challenge look like to you? Are you challenged in lessons? And one of the children said, oh yeah, our teachers give us lots of challenges, but they call them challenges, you know, but they're not really challenges, miss. They just called them. They're not any harder than anything else. So how much work is being done to communicate with your learners and work with them in partnership to identify whether challenge is truly there or not, or whether it's just talked about, but there's no challenge, no deep thinking inherent within the tasks that those children are experiencing. And similarly, what does the communication with parents look like so they understand things like the importance of cognitive challenge, how their children who are more able might have certain characteristics that they need to be aware of, what support those children might need, what growth mindset means, and how supported failure is actually really a positive thing and they shouldn't be afraid of their children making mistakes. So what sort of partnership working goes on in our schools to support that whole agenda? Okay, and last but not least, number 6 is all about monitoring and evaluation. How are classrooms monitored? How is practice monitored to make sure that those levels of cognitive challenge are absolutely embedded across the school, that the pedagogy supports that your more able learners are doing well? You know, what are the outcomes for them? There's no point saying, oh, challenge levels are great, and then, well, we don't get any greater depth, right? Because that's telling you, well, we don't get, you know, the higher grades at GCSE or A level, because that is telling us that potentially, that's one way of monitoring, that we're not really raising the bar for our more able, and certainly we're not providing a challenge for all of our learners. So is there is the more able agenda or challenge for all, or both? Are they on your monitoring and evaluation framework in school? Don't make it the responsibility of one person to do all of that. You know, are your subject leaders looking at challenge and looking at more able provision as part of their ongoing subject monitoring, and then feeding that back to your more able lead, if you have one, so that they get that overall picture of what's happening, and that then leadership then have that overall ownership for that, so that they can see the big picture in school. So again, section 6 helps you to think about what you should be doing with that as well. Okay, as I said, if you evidence the majority of the framework criteria at a high level, because you can assess yourself according to where you think you are against each element of the criteria, you can then apply for formal recognition through the NACE Challenge Award. More about that soon. Okay, so very quickly then, a bit of a summary. How do you use it? You can use it as a planning tool to establish whole school policy, as I've explained, what your key priorities are and your CPD requirements might be. And there's also on the Challenge Hub, one of the resources that you get to support you is the Challenge Framework Progress Tracking. You can see a little snip of that on the right, that just gives you a quick checklist to think about where you might be and where your starting point might be. So you might use it as a planning tool. You might use it as well, or instead of, as an audit tool. For you, if you think you've got, you know, you're developing good practice, where are you against that challenge framework? And what might you need to do next? And are there specific elements that you need to concentrate on, perhaps a bit more? And then again, schools use it, as I say, as an assessment tool. Those that have established that policy and practice to review an action plan and make sure they can tweak it even further, so that they get that sustained excellence in terms of challenge in teaching and learning, but also in leadership across the school. I am keeping a check on the time, we're all right. Okay, so when you start off with the challenge framework, one of the most important things to do is to identify your own starting point. And as I said, those resources that I've just talked about will help you to do that. And what the framework does is it identifies 4. Are you an entry-level school, which is, are you at the early stages of establishing good practice and provision? Are you a developing school, consolidating knowledge and practice, and so on? Are you a high-quality provision? And are you then a school preparing to gain accreditation? And what you do is you evaluate yourself. It helps you to really pinpoint where you are in terms of that starting point. And of course, from that stage, you can go forward and actually do your action planning effectively. And again, there are action plan tools, there are policy writing tools that are all included on the Challenge Hub to support you on that journey. So you're not just sort of, oh, you need a better policy. There's an actual policy writing set of guidance and a set of effective policy review guidance for you to use that will help you to assess your practice really, really effectively and plan your next steps. Now, as I said, I'm going to not go into these in detail, giving you a bit of an overview. Oh, good, that's the time, we're fine. Giving you a bit of an overview of each one of these. You will see those when you get if you access the recording after this, that's fine. Okay, so before we go on to talk to the schools, I want to just quickly talk to you about how the Challenge Development Programme, and specifically its most important tool, the framework, supports and drives whole school improvement. So again, I'll give you a moment for me to have a sip of water and for you to read. Just read this slide first of all, please. Okay, what's really important about the challenge framework is that robust evaluation and then your action planning, but then the fact that there are resources provided to help you achieve those actions. And if you use the challenge framework effectively, it will help you to create that whole school ethos of high aspiration and expectation. But what's very, very important is that it will help you to achieve consistency. And we know that as schools, that's something we're always searching for in terms of practice, that it might be fine in one area, but it's not fine somewhere else in school. So again, the using the framework will help you achieve that because it works right across whole departments, but also in individual lessons for individual teachers. So it makes sure that it's fully, that your work for challenge and provision for the more able is fully embedded and of high quality. And it will help you to plan and implement developments in quality teaching and support those through the implementation and development of a high quality CPD programme. Okay, so you can see that in general. Now, just a little bit of background before I get to our lovely visitors here today. I first became aware of the Challenge Development Programme in 2009. And at first, I have to be honest, I genuinely thought I was simply looking at how we could improve provision for our more able learners. What I learned from using the challenge framework was that by focusing on those more able learners, we would understand the importance of challenge for all, and that would completely transform the school in terms of culture, the quality of education and learner outcomes. And I remember the head at the time, it was the school in Halifax, the head at the time when he retired, he said, Chris, I was thinking back, what made the difference at this school all those years ago? He said, and it was doing the challenge, he said it was getting the challenge development programme, and it was focusing on the more able, teaching to the top, and that lift for everybody in terms of challenge. So the NACE Challenge Framework, as I say, is systematically structured and evidence informed, and it helps us to undertake that robust audited provision, but then also to make sure that we can drive things forward and make things better. And just for those of you who might be from sixth forms, it's driven and improved provision at sixth form colleges. And Michaela, I've just noticed that Michaela has just entered the waiting room. She's going to talk to you about this because Toot Hill has used the challenge framework not just to drive provision in terms of challenge across key stages 3 and 4, but it's had a dramatic effect on their provision in key stage 5. So again, I'll let you read that because this is summarising it for you, then I'll pick out a few points. Okay, now I've talked about some of these already, but just to recap, to tailor provision and targets for improvement effectively and evaluate their impact, we definitely need to have knowledge of learners' needs. It's essential. So we therefore need to identify the learners who would benefit initially from more stretch and challenge in the curriculum. And that runs through the Challenge Development Programme, supporting you to do that. And a close focus on classroom learning experiences ensures that attention is given to motivating, stretching and challenge for everybody. Okay, we know that at the heart of what we do, years ago, people used to think that the more able agenda and challenge was all about extra things after school. It's not. It's about what happens in the classroom, and what the Challenge Development Programme does is help you to impact on that positively. And it impacts on all teachers very, very effectively. One of the elements of that, as I've mentioned already, is talking to children and how they are challenged. Because in schools, we need to draw on those views, particularly the views of not unidentified underachievers, right? Because we might not be seeing that children do need more challenge. They might be showing themselves as poorly behaved and so on, because they're not being challenged enough. And once you start challenging them, you realise actually we've got some great, really more able learners here. Okay, so we know that all of this will influence teaching strategies. Okay, it will also influence the support that we provide for learners and parents, and encourage a commitment to ensuring that the needs of able learners are discussed when they move between teachers or between classes or between key stages. So again, that's why transition is a key element of that framework as well. And we know that the framework provides that cohesive structure for us as schools and for leaders in order to achieve that. Okay. Okay, again, as I've said, it does align really well with current inspection frameworks. And there's another little snip there from 2019 from the actual inspection handbook, just to illustrate that for you. So I'll give you a second to look at that again. And then we're moving swiftly on to our schools that are here this evening to talk to you. Okay, you see there again, when you're looking at the school inspection handbook, those words, coherence and consistency, are really important. Okay, because it's no good if just things are happening in one place but not another. And the framework really helps you to get that consistency. Okay, so it gives me great pleasure now. There's some snips here of what schools say, but I'm going to whiz through those for you a second. Before I introduce you to Nicola from Kentmere and then Michaela from Toot Hill Secondary School, there's a poll here just to see if you've been listening, really. So can you just have a quick go at answering that one? Responsibility for meeting the needs of the more able and ensuring challenge for all lies with whom? So have a go at that one, please. 76% of you have said all staff. Yes, the responsibility for meeting the needs of more able learners and ensuring challenge for all definitely lies with everybody across the school. Now, you could also argue that everybody that's ticked another box is also right, because obviously those people, head teachers, more able leads, Ofsted, governors and teachers are also involved as part of that, under that heading of all staff. You could argue that governors aren't. Governors do need to be involved. Obviously, it's staff, leaders' responsibilities, whole school responsibility. But all stakeholders need to know that, that it's a responsibility of the school to make sure that cognitive challenge is effectively provided for all learners and that the needs of more able are met. So thank you for that. That's really interesting. I mean, Ofsted have already mentioned, haven't they, how they're looking at the needs of more able, but actually when it comes to making sure that we are meeting them, right, we need to make sure that our staff understand their responsibilities. But it can't just be the more able lead on their own. It's a huge job, and it's not going to work if you don't engage everybody and help them to understand what their responsibility is. We'll move on then, because the highlight of this is a little bit of school voice, really. From Kentmere Primary Academy in Rochdale, we've got Nicola, the head, who's going to talk to you about how they use the Challenge Development Programme and the impact it's had on their school. And likewise, Michaela from Toot Hill in Nottingham is also going to share some of her reflections about how they use that there. So we'll start with Nicola. I'll stop sharing. You'll be grateful to know you won't be hearing my voice more, and I'll mute myself, and I'll pass you over to Nicola. Thank you.
Okay, can I just check? Can everyone see that screen? Is that good? Yeah, perfect. Getting the thumbs up. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. A lot of pressure now, Chris. Now you said it's the highlight. I just really want to echo a lot of the things that Chris has said, because we've just found it invaluable working with the NACE Challenge Framework, and that's why I was more than happy to speak today when Chris asked me. Okay, so we started our work with NACE in 2019, and at that point it was primarily because we wanted to have those stronger outcomes for our grade to depth learners. As Chris has already alluded to, when you start focusing particularly on your grade to depth, it raises the attainment of all your children, and we really noticed that impact with our results. if I think back to 2018, in reading especially, we noticed the biggest difference. So we went from 67% in 2018 achieving age-related expectations to 91% in the summer of 2022. And if you think about that as well, we've had those disrupted years, should we just call them as well. In terms of the more able, we went from 18% at grade steps in 2018 to 33% this year. So again, we did focus on the more able, but we saw the impact with a lot of our students. But what really helped us when we were starting this work was just having that framework and having that structure. Okay, so that's just a little bit of a context about our school. We are higher than national average in terms of our SEND, our free school meals, our EAL. It is in a deprived area of Rochdale, and there is a lot of different languages spoken. Okay, so I've tried to pick out different parts about, and it's like a bit of a mixture of what we did and the impact it had. So in terms of like the element 1, in terms of leadership and governance, the biggest thing that we wanted our school vision to shout out was, we have high aspirations, we have challenge for all our children. And so we wanted it, like I say, it's not senior leaders, it wasn't me sitting in my office with my senior leadership team, it was all the staff, whatever their roles in school, and the governors as well, all stakeholders. We had pupil voice there as well, and it was about rewriting our vision statement, and you can see it just there in the corner, the happy school, happy children. And that was really important because it was about everybody having that consistent message and obviously being really obvious to everybody. The other thing we worked on as a whole school was about that consistent approach to metacognition, and we created those posters that you can see just on the screen at the top. And again, those are consistent throughout the school, and when you come into our school and look at lessons, you will hear that consistent language being used. Governors, again, governors were vital because it's really important. If you came to everybody in school, they would be able to talk. Teachers, TAs, senior leaders could talk about challenge, but actually it's really interesting now that when governors ask questions, if my subject leader's doing a presentation, they'll also say, okay, tell me about your more able, tell me about your challenge within that. So again, it's about them being involved. The mindset, I was interested to hear when Chris was talking about this before, and it was biggest job was a big shift in mindset for the staff, because they saw challenge as you just do it when you finish your work, it's just a challenge, it's a tag on. We're like, no, it's not, it's completely different. And the other thing was about the children's perceptions. We had a QA visit, and when the QA, when Mike was feeding back to me, he said, Nicola, we've just got a bit of an issue, because when I asked the children about, are they challenged, how do they find the work at Kentmere, they go, yeah, it's just right, it's okay, it's easy. And I was like, what? I went, oh, which children did you talk to? And he showed me that, and I was like, okay, we've got a range of SEND in there and all sorts. And yeah, they're saying, and when I spoke to children afterwards, I just went to them in the playground. I said, talk to me when you had our visitor. And they said, I didn't want to let you down. And we're like, what? And they saw challenge, if their work was hard for them, they saw it as a bad thing. So again, it was about really unpicking with the children about that it's okay to be challenged. And actually, so that's why we ended up creating this poster with the staff and with the children about, at Kentmere, we love to be challenged. And you'll see from the faces that, okay, so you'll hear staff referring to it in the lessons, like, where are you on that challenge scale? And the higher the challenge, so the harder the challenge, the higher up the scale you are, you can see that the face becomes even more smiley. So that was really important part of our journey. Okay, in terms of element 2, in terms of the identification, what did I say about this? Okay, so now we've got this whole school approach, and I think this is again about that consistency. We've got a better policy in place, so it talks about how we identify our more able and our exceptionally more able pupils. We've got registers. We track all the children across all the different curriculum areas. We've also changed about how we communicate that with parents as well. Subject leaders, they're confident to be able to talk about what more able looks like in their subjects. And again, it's just about that. It's on everybody's radar, it's on everybody's agenda. So most conversations at some point will come back to focusing on challenge and on more able. Okay. Okay, in terms of the curriculum, teaching and support, this was massive. So I really have tried to cut this down. But our biggest thing, I would say, is when you go into the lessons, the questioning is so much better. We have brought into additional support from NACE, and we have really worked on that. And Chris has been over to work with my staff a few times now. We did some Zoom, didn't we? Because we did during COVID, but then obviously she's been in real life as well. And again, the questioning by staff, and they were amazed that just by adapting their questioning, how they could really raise the bar basically in terms of challenging their lesson. So that was massive. Teacher workload, we all know it's on everybody's radar. And so what we've done is we've altered our feedback and marking. And we've introduced the rich challenge stickers. And again, that was through our work with NACE and through visiting another Challenge Award school. Chris talked about it before. We went over to Copthorne. Again, staff loved it because it reduced their time spent marking, but actually the quality of responses to the children has improved dramatically. Revising our curriculum will never be finished. We are constantly looking to improve it, but it's about that ambitious and challenging curriculum for all. And when you look at it now, and especially, you know, as you get up into the Key Stage 2, it really is that challenging curriculum. Again, I've already mentioned about changing the staff mindset, and also incorporating that, we also re-looked at our well-being strategy as well, because obviously if you're reducing marking, you're reducing the time spent marking, then obviously it does improve staff well-being. Okay. Professional development, so CPD, this was, I would say, the cornerstone of our success, because we weren't just telling staff what we wanted them to do, we were telling them why we're doing it, how we're doing it, and giving them the tools, giving them the skills so they could do this. And I think what really reassured them is it wasn't massive changes, it's just about doing things better. Okay, so we did lots and lots of training, and you can see there on the screen, I've put some different types of training. The blue speech bubble, that's an example of when we did some work on wobbler questions. So there's a great book by James Nottingham. And again, if you engage with the NACE programme, you'll probably come across that name. And it's just about challenge being a really explicit element, not only in the planning, but in the lessons as well. Okay. Communication and partnership. I've already talked about the importance of our governors, and it's great that our governors, you know, there might be some areas of school they'll get in, you know, to grips with, but actually they always do ask about our challenge and our greater depth. So also working with parents, we've done lots and lots of parent workshops to make sure that parents are aware about what challenge is. Even during the COVID times when we couldn't have parents in school, we created Loom videos and sent those out to parents as well to keep challenge on the agenda and to make sure they were informed. Pupil voice, that's key in school, but obviously we've now got our challenge group, and they are very on the money. So if we have visitors in, and they might want to speak to school council or prefects, the challenge group will obviously go forward sometimes and go, do you not want to speak to us? We've got great things we want to tell you about our school. And you know, they do keep us on our toes. Okay, monitoring and evaluation. We have our school improvement calendar, which is very much about how we're going to monitor throughout the whole school year. So whatever we're doing, we're always, again, focusing in on the challenge, on the more able, and that just basically goes through absolutely everything that we do. Like I say, it's about just putting that sharp lens, that sharp focus on it. So when our subject leaders are doing pupil voice, or if they're doing a work analysis, again, they're really focusing on how much challenge was in this lesson. If there is a rich challenge sticker there, okay, was it challenging, or was it just a bit of a closed question? So that's something that's been changed. We're planning regular learning walks, we do deep dives, our subject leaders do drop-in and things like that. We have introduced coaching this year, and again, that's focused a lot on questioning and challenge too. We do pupil premium walks, we do SEND walks, we do SLT learning walks, and we regularly do open mornings as well. So there's lots and lots of opportunities to kind of keep a check on if everybody. I've got 4 ECTs this year, and again, I did over the last couple of days, I've kind of done drop-ins with maths lessons, and their level of challenge and their questioning was absolutely amazing. I mean, if they didn't look so fresh-faced, I don't think you'd pick them up out as ECTs. So that was really great to see. Okay, so I've already talked about the impact in terms of data, which, you know, is important and obviously is ahead when it's only performance management. That was important for me too. But these are the other things that we've seen from just working with the challenge framework. Children being able to talk positively about challenge, and that's where our challenge scale came from. They're not afraid of finding a task difficult, and they actually kind of embrace it and get excited about it now. Children are resilient and they tackle those challenges with determination to succeed. Challenges are non-negotiable in every lesson. Children working at greater depth or potentially greater depth are closely tracked and then monitored. We know exactly what they're doing. We know, you know, how they're doing it, and we know, you know, how they're doing it in each subject. And I think the biggest recognition as well for me was when we had our feedback from our QA visit, and again, they just recognised that difference. I mean, I've done a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but I think it goes back to what Chris said. It's about that consistency across the school and just everybody, you know, working together. And again, it's about that no ceiling on learning and giving every child the opportunity and giving them the challenge.
Nicola, that is fantastic. Thank you so much. I love the list of I know you've talked about your impact on your outcomes in terms of your data, but the way that you've talked about the impact on the children, and that's what we're trying to get across to everybody. This isn't just about you more able. This is about the impact of this programme on every child. And I can talk with it. I talk about it with passion because I've experienced it. And I would, you know, I don't think Nicola or I would be here talking about it if we didn't believe in it. So swiftly over then. Thank you so much, Nicola. That was wonderful. To Michaela.
Hi everybody, I'm Michaela Middleton, and I'm up from Toot Hill School in Nottingham. We're a big comprehensive secondary school, so we have just over 2,000 students across from year 7 to years 13. And we've been working with NACE now since 2011. So Nicola obviously talked about sort of their journey from 2019 to now with NACE, but if I was to sit here and do that, then we'd be here all evening. So I've just kind of wanted to focus today on some of the key areas that actually over the last few years have been the most impactful. I came to Toot Hill in 2013 as an NQT, now the ECT, and in my second year I picked up the More Able coordinator role, which has now actually turned into an associate senior leader role, because of the view of the senior leadership and of the importance of this agenda, which is the main kind of thing I want to talk to you about today. So I think the starting point for us as a school was the recognition of a whole school approach to supporting the more able. And with that, it had to come from the leadership level. We were really, really lucky. So when we started reviewing our curriculum, when the new Ofsted framework came out, and we started to see, you know, the words like identification and impact and assessing, we started a big curriculum review across our school. And at the time I was head of department. And going through that process, we then had our third NACE accreditation. And the way in which we were analysing our curriculum, we were using the challenge toolbox for curriculum assessment. All heads of department were using it because our head of school was so passionate about it at the time. And using that to review our curriculum and see the impact from sort of 2017, 2018 to now has been paramount to the success of how we've built in ambition, really. So the responsibility, as we've just been talking about, lies with all staff. But it is absolutely essential that the leaders of any school buy into this agenda. And we're part of a big trust network of schools, and there are lots of G&T coordinators or more able coordinators that seem to be working in isolation and not really seeing much impact of what they are doing. And it really is because of that. It has to be that collective approach. And I'm going to talk to you in a second about the importance of this not being a bolt-on in terms of curriculum planning and curriculum implementation, but it's equally as important for it not to be a bolt-on within the leadership. So it's really, really important that all SLT, heads of school, the deputy, see this as important as the More Able coordinator would do. I think as well, I just wanted to mention here the importance of the buy-in from the middle leaders. It's one thing to get leadership on your side, but the people that are disseminating this to the staff in the school, and as I've said, you know, we are a huge school. We have 120 full-time members of teaching staff. We've got 25 heads of department. We've got 7 senior leaders and associate school leaders. So we are working on a huge basis, and it's incredibly important, I think, on any level, but especially for big schools, that you are sending the right message to the middle leaders, because they are the ones that are ultimately disseminating that to their teams. And if they don't feel passionate about it, then they aren't going to be able to make their staff, and they are the people that are making the impact on the ground day to day. So as a middle leader at the time, when I was head of department, and we started using this challenge framework really to review our curriculum, that was the main reason we were using it, and the curriculum review tool. We spent months with the senior leaders before we even took it back into departments. So it wasn't an agenda that was put to us as heads of department and then, right, you need to now take this back to your teams. It took, I mean, I can't remember exactly, but 4 to 6 months, I think, we were working on our curriculum review, and the importance of now instilling that ambition, challenge and entitlement for all, which Chris and Nicola have both talked about, and seeing that when you create an enriching, challenging experience for everybody, for the top, it encompasses challenge for all. And so we do use this to assess our curriculum and review its impact and make that commitment to continue professional learning. But we very much have this whole school leadership agenda of we teach to the top, and there is no limit on learning. And we are also we have an incredibly high percentage of higher prior attainers coming into our cohort every year. Around about 55 to 65% of our cohort are higher prior attainers. So actually a lot of our sort of middle to bottom sets actually will be the top sets in a lot of other schools. So the need for us to provide for the more able and therefore all was especially important because of our intake. And then before I go on to talk about sort of a zoom in, we use the framework to audit our provision on an annual basis. So we do this every single year. However, we obviously audit this area of the curriculum in the same way as we audit SEND, PP, EAL through this entitlement for all. So we do that on a half-termly basis, and we use pizza slices actually to do this. So it's just kind of triangulating what's being said by the pupils, what we are doing in CPL is exactly what we are seeing on the ground, and we use that to kind of assess from lesson to lesson how we're auditing our provision by seeing what is happening in the classroom with curriculum. And there have been a couple of a few things that we've focused on in relation to the challenge framework especially. There was a whole school commitment to challenge not being a bolt-on. We categorically do not allow now extension tasks or challenge questions or an add-on to lessons or to work, because that is limiting ambition for other pupils in that group. And we recently had actually our 4th accreditation. So Chris had spent some time with me and Hannah, who is one of the assistant head teachers, and we were talking about this buy-in of staff that actually in every classroom, in every school, no matter what kind of ability you are faced with in that room, there is a more able pupil. And so to put a limit on learning, whether it's a, you know, a bottom set or a top set or a mixed ability group, is really not that entitlement for all. And when I have delivered CPL to staff about this, that's kind of the nugget that I will often use. Think about the student in your class or in your group that is the most able. They don't have to be on the register. You don't have to have identified them as that, but you have recognized their ability is slightly higher than those of the peers in their group, and you plan your lesson and you tailor the curriculum to that particular student. And that's been transformational, really, I think, for us in terms of how staff now view the curriculum. We are incredibly ambitious. Challenge is built in within lessons. It isn't something that is added on. It isn't something that is completed if students complete their work. It really is that everybody has that entitlement, and we then, as subject specialists or classroom teachers, we then scaffold our support down effectively. Ironically, it doesn't really make sense, but instead of supporting up to that point, and not everybody might get to that point, we kind of flip that, and you plan to there and then support students to get to that point. So your support and scaffold is coming from the bar being set incredibly high. Now, I just wanted to show you this as well, because we use the challenge framework to plan for each academic year. So what I will do using the challenge framework at the start of every academic year is create the extended curriculum plan. Now on here you can see things like the Scholars Programme and lectures, for example, that are kind of part of our extended provision. But there are absolutely elements throughout the year that we have sort of audited at the end of the summer term. So this is where this information has come from. June 2022 is when we do conduct our audit. And then from that audit, we set ourselves priorities for that following academic year and plan for them in exactly the same way that subject leaders, heads of department, heads of year will plan their time across the academic year. It's incredibly important to have an agenda, set yourself targets, consider the impact, and then alongside this document in June 2023, I will then use the two and see what we need to continue with, what's ongoing. Let's set ourselves some more targets, and then we continue to kind of assess that way. So there's a couple of examples there. I want to particularly draw your attention to the twilight, the peer talk, and how classroom talk is essential for challenge. And what I've decided to do, instead of talking about every element of the framework, just picked up on this one area of the curriculum that we've been using the challenge framework for. Now, we have noticed kind of in the last sort of last academic year and sort of the last one, that our classrooms are becoming quite quiet. We come from we've got a very affluent cohort, and our students are incredibly well behaved. We've got we have sort of minimal low-level disruption and not much persistent high-level disruption either. However, that is kind of, because we've been quite committed to our behaviour for learning techniques over the last few years, it's kind of turned into a very quiet place to be. I think actually Christabel commented on that when she came a couple of weeks ago, and we've noticed that, and staff are just a little bit worried, and I think just generally teachers don't want to give too much flexibility to students in case they are given 5 and take 10. But we can be more relaxed, we can be more flexible with our more able students. And so this has kind of turned into, excuse me, a whole school priority for this academic year. And I've kind of sort of shown you on here how we've used the challenge framework to continue to monitor and assess. So I suppose the starting point was the recognition by us that high quality structured classroom talk supports learning and in turn creates an enriching and challenging learning environment. We need to hear our children talking to be able to witness the thought process that's going into some of their ideas. So through learning walks and visits to lessons, we've seen then that we aren't doing enough to structure classroom talk, and what we have seen potentially is teachers setting an inquiry question or a question, and then, right, I want you to think, pair, share, that happening for 30-40 seconds, but then just children naturally coming to a stop with their conversations because they don't really know what else to talk about. So we've been monitoring this over a period of time. So I'd say probably sort of from Christmas last year until now, we are starting to think about how we're going to change this and what impact it's going to have on the ground. So obviously this isn't at the end, but we're using the challenge framework to help us kind of go through this at key moments and ensure that we're doing everything consistently and properly so that we have the outcome that we want. So CPL, so continued professional learning, started last half term. We also had a session on inset, and we had our first twilight last Tuesday on high quality classroom talk, and this was delivered by one of our trust leads for quality of education. So she came in and delivered a session on how to conduct and how to support children with that classroom talk and scaffolding it and things. And we are at this point now continuing to monitor it and conducting student voice. So Hannah conducted some student voice last week, and I will be doing the same in the penultimate week of this half term. And then we will just continue to monitor throughout the year and then evaluate our impact on this agenda, which is obviously the sixth element on the challenge framework, and if needs be, continue this progression into next year. We quite often notice that with a big school, a massive school like ours, things take a long time to become embedded, sometimes 2, if not 3 academic years before we really have embedded them and staff are doing things naturally. So this will continue to be monitored and potentially put into our long-term plan for the more able curriculum next year as well. So thank you ever so much. Thank you for having me. And I'm always here to answer questions. We've been working with NACE for a long time, so I'm more than happy for Chris to pass on our details as a school, and I'd be happy to help anybody if needs be. Thanks ever so much.
Thanks so much, Michaela. Really appreciate that. That's lovely. So the Challenge Award, obviously, if you feel once you've used the NACE framework and the Challenge Development Programme, if you feel, right, our provision is fantastic, we've assessed it as such, we've done loads of work over the last couple of years for it. Some of you might be miles ahead on that journey already, and you get the framework to help you identify that. You can then go for the NACE Challenge Award, and that's been awarded to more than 450 schools across England, Wales and internationally. So there was a question sent in about whether you can be assessed internationally. You can, our assessors go all over the world. As we said, Michaela's school has recently achieved, at the end of last half term, their accreditation for the 4th time, which is wonderful. They also achieved our very first NACE Challenge Ambassador status, which is a new thing for schools who, between their accreditations, keep up very high levels of engagement with NACE and support NACE further, and NACE supports them. So that they're the first school to ever achieve that. So that's absolutely wonderful. But it is a very prestigious award, and it tells external people, not mentioning any names, but they may begin with R-O or I, that it tells them a lot about your school in the first place. So it gives them a really positive view of some of the things that were happening and paints a great picture. Okay, I'll just move swiftly on. So as I said, it will support you because you use the same framework to then say, right, this is where we are. And what you do to get the award is you provide evidence against each of those statements to say, to prove that you are where you're assessing yourself as being. Okay. Once that happens, is you will send over that assessment data to the person that's identified as your assessor. When you've applied for the award, you'll be given an assessor. Your information and your assessment evidence will be sent over to them. They will then look at it and scrutinise it and say, yes, you are ready for assessment. You might have had a pre-assessment visit as well in the first place that helps you, give you further guidance. But once we think you're ready for assessment, we'll then set a date. We'll come in and we'll spend a day with you qualifying your judgments and making sure they're correct. During that day, we'll talk to parents, we'll talk to pupils, we'll talk to staff and governors to triangulate your evidence and to dig deeper and find out about the richness of what you're providing. A large proportion of that Challenge Award assessment day is visiting lessons and seeing that challenge in practice, because obviously this is all about what your curriculum's like and what challenge practice is like in those classrooms. So you get lots of guidance to help you with that when you go for the awards. That's very important. And there's also this, which is a journey to accreditation, and that is available on our website. And if you can't find it, please contact one of us. We'll make sure you get a copy of that. But it's a really handy tool, sort of almost talking you through the process to Challenge Award assessment. But you wouldn't really go for Challenge Award accreditation until you were satisfied that you've been on that challenge journey using the Challenge Development Programme to guide you. Okay. There's also all this other additional support that you can access from NACE, including the online resources that are available through the NACE Challenge Hub. Once you've got the programme, you have free access to all of those. And as we've said before, there is consultancy there. We also provide a free curriculum audit, which I like to call a focused aspect of the Challenge Development Programme, but it's actually free to all that. The curriculum audit is free to any member. So when you join NACE, you get access to that curriculum audit, and what that allows you to do is go through a similar process as you would with the Challenge Framework, but simply focused on curriculum implementation, curriculum impact and curriculum intent from the point of view of the More Able and Challenge for All. So it gives you a really great tool to get that side of your practice right in the first place. You've also got a NACE assessment audit that's available, and that helps you develop that quality assessment and quality feedback approaches that are really going to impact on whole school and your cognitive challenge provision. As I've mentioned before, there's bespoke CPD and there's coaching and mentoring available from an experienced practitioner that provides guidance through that audit and action planning process for you as leaders. Okay, little thing, quote to think about before we finish. We know that lots of schools have already got loads to celebrate, but using that Challenge Development Programme will support and drive further improvement. You've heard about it from Nicola and Michaela, and I've experienced it myself. And we know that if we're going to implement Challenge for All and we're going to really provide for our more able learners, we will have some challenges on the way. But gaining that national and international recognition for your work is just the most incredible reward, above and beyond the most important bit, which is how that work impacts on your learners and impacts on the challenge and the culture in your school. It's a brilliant feeling for your staff, because more and more people become interested in the work of the school, and it almost sets you up on this cycle of continuing learning from each other and getting better and better and better. So it's a really well-deserved reward when you get that Challenge Award. A little bit about prices. Don't really like talking about money, but anyway, we are currently celebrating 40 years of NACE, and as part of that, there is a special offer on. Turn to camera. And that is that the framework at the moment, if you get the very basic form, instead of being £500, it's £350 at the minute. So that involves the framework, the handbook, resources, access to the Challenge Hub, and your Getting Started call. So that's at a reduced price at the moment. If you get this package number 2, that's reduced by £100 at the moment, and that also gives you that half a day bespoke consultancy around the framework for your school. If you get package 3, and I'm not saying it's my favourite because it's the most expensive, I just think as a head it was the best value. You get the framework, the handbook, the resources, and you get that half-day consultancy, but a full day of CPD, which you can break up into 2 half days to fit your CPD or CPL calendar. And as I said, you can also purchase half-day consultancy. So it is a good time. I'm not like doing efforts, but it is a really good time to get the Challenge Development Programme. Okay, I think there's just one more. I know we've run over, but if there are any questions that anybody has, please unmute, shout out, they'll put them in the chat. Otherwise, feel free to get in contact with us. I will go back to this in a second. There is a poll for you to do before you go, but you can see that there are all these different ways in getting in contact with us. So please, do get in contact, and you can feel free to contact me as well. But also join the NACE mailing list, because you get free sample resources that will support practice and policy in your school. And please now answer the poll before you go. Thank you, and we'll go back to then. If any of you want to stay and ask any questions, feel free to do so. It's been lovely to have you. I know you've had a lot of information to take on board. Again, thanks to Nicola and Michaela, have been amazing. And thank you for being here. But I will go back to questions in a minute. Let's just finish this poll first of all. Oh, good. We've got some people who want to join NACE. We've got nearly everybody, hopefully, understanding the benefits of the NACE Challenge Award, the development programme. And we've got some people actually continuing to work towards it, who will move forward. Well, that's brilliant. But again, thank you very much for your contributions, for actually being here, and to our 2 contributors. That's wonderful. Thank you very much indeed.